another interview today. Today we have the commissioner at Margate, probably the youngest commissioner in Margate, Commissioner Antonio Arcerio. By the way, notice how I'm pronouncing it because I'm Latino myself. I just found out that this brother is not Latino, even though he can definitely look the part. So let me repeat that. Antonio Arcerio, welcome to the Broad Social Network, Commissioner. Today, at approximately 1:20 in the afternoon. I would love to be able to have my platform meet you and get to know what's the update in Margate while we are under the pandemic of COVID-19. Go ahead and introduce yourself to social media land.
Hi, Ted and the Broward Social Network. It's a pleasure to be here. As you said, I am the youngest commissioner in Margate. I'm the youngest elected in Margate. And I actually sit on the advisory board council for the young elected municipal officials at the Florida League of Cities, along with the likes of Josh Simmons and Josh Rydell and some of the old Sabrina over in Hollandale. So Broward's really kicking butt when it comes to getting young elected officials in office. So I'm excited to give my platform. I'm excited to do it digitally like this. And I look forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. Commissioner, let's talk about the elephant in the room. As you know, globally, we're under this pandemic. And one of the many reasons why I do these interviews is because people are living in fear. And people now more than ever need leaders in order to be able to give them guidance. Give us a snapshot as to what's going on in Margate. I personally have lost 3 family members. I don't know if you have lost any family members or if you know anybody who is expired as a result of COVID-19. Give us a snapshot or bird's eye view as to the impact of COVID-19 in Margate and to you personally.
Yeah, so on a personal note, I did. Unfortunately, I lost a grandmother to COVID-19
my condolences.
last week. And it was unfortunate because she was in a rehabilitation center for something totally different, something that she would have probably just been okay. But as we know, a large number of the deaths happen to seniors in these elderly type facilities. And unfortunately, she became one of those statistics, unfortunately. So it does hit home, and my
condolences.
It's tough to swallow because I see 2 sides to this in terms of the shutdown and the economic impact. You have people that are maybe more wealthy, people that are retired. You have people that have income coming in, and it's easy for them to say, well, let's just sit home and not open up. They're getting their paycheck.
Right.
On the other side, we have the working people that, need to make a living, want to continue about their daily lives. And so, I'm stuck at a crossroad because, I did lose a family member to it, but I also know that Margate is a working city. It's a very diverse city and our businesses, reflect that. And we also have seen the effects that this has caused on some of the socioeconomic less advantaged groups. We know based on a meeting that Margate had with some of the members of the Black Caucus and the Hispanic vote, the disproportionate numbers of minorities that have been affected by this. So I would say that Margate's experiencing what the rest of South Florida and the rest of most major populations are experiencing. It is a hardship.
Do you, by any chance, Commissioner Arcerio, do you have, and this may be an unfair question, and if you don't, it's okay. Do you have numbers? Sure. Do you have numbers for Margate? What does it look like?
Well, in terms, I would say that we're a fairly diverse city. If you're in terms of numbers of kind of the vision that Margate looks like.
No, in terms of numbers of COVID-19, in terms of confirmed and deaths. That's what I meant.
I could pull that up. The last I checked, we were slightly over 100.
Of confirmed or deaths?
Of confirmed cases. I do not know the number of deaths. But I know we were, I want to say in the 120 to 130 confirmed cases as of now.
Now, every elected official I interview, I say this respectfully, me personally, as a person who's been trained in public health and biomedical science, I don't believe any of the numbers. Since this is an airborne pathogen, I do believe that we have many more confirmed cases than we know. for those numbers, for that number of 100 to be accurate, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, we would have to test every single person because we don't know. My wife works in an emergency room and I'm asymptomatic, but I'm almost sure I'm positive. I'm almost sure I'm COVID positive because at the beginning of this pandemic, we didn't have enough PPEs for healthcare workers. So I'm hoping it's less than 100, but in reality, we really don't know what the numbers are, correct?
Yeah, I in a non-expertise explanation, I would have to agree with you on that. And I also would respectfully tell the people that, well, only 80,000 people died in the nation. It's about the same as the flu every year. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but here's the thing. That's with us staying home. So if we didn't stay home, imagine what those numbers would be. So I agree, you know, maybe it's not as severe as people think, but I would 100% agree with you in terms of the number of people that have it. I think it's a lot larger. I try to look at the numbers at the state every day, and the state says, and again, I'm not an expert, but they say, well, we're flattening the curve. Well, I don't know. And here's why I've come to that conclusion. Yes, in the beginning, we needed to ramp up our testing, and they made a little bit of a jump there. And you kind of saw the numbers go up naturally as they're testing more people. You're going to see more confirmed cases.
Right.
But we haven't really tested. We haven't tested more people, like increased the number of tests per day. So if we're only testing the same number of people every day for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and the testing rate is 8 to 10%, well, then we're just plateaued based on the amount of people we're testing. So
exactly.
On an expert way, that's kind of my feeling on this.
Exactly. In terms of, and again, my condolences for your grandmother. Let's go back to the facility that you mentioned. Is Margate known for a population of the elderly? Do you know? Because if that's the case, you guys are vulnerable. You understand what I mean?
We do have large concentrations of a senior community. I would say historically, Margate has been a retirement-based community. Although according to the previous census, the average age in Margate, don't hold me exactly, but it was in the early 40s. So we've seen a major shift in the age of Margate, the average age. And I think when the 2020 census comes out, we're going to see that average age drop even more. And that was one of the reasons why I was excited to win election as a young commissioner, was because, I'm able to bring to the table, I kind of look, and I look like the members of my community. I'm the average age of the average, I'm 35 years old. I'm right around that. I
was going to say, would it be inappropriate to ask you your age? Because I don't know if that would have been inappropriate. So
No, not at all. Not at all.
But you're older than Commissioner Sabrina Javanella, right?
Yeah, to my knowledge, I believe she is the youngest elected official. I don't know in the state, but I would say she's probably the youngest in Broward and definitely one of the youngest in the state.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you said that there is a decent population of the elderly, of senior citizens in Margate, and moving forward, and with my understanding of the pathogen and the pandemic moving forward, it is probably logical to assume that you guys may have a second wave if we're not going to take precautions, if we're not taking precautionary measures, because as early as this morning, I do believe that the Mayor Holness is talking about the possibility of opening up the county again. So I'm not sure what that means for your city. I'm not sure what that means for the establishments. I'm thinking about the other residents where your grandmother was. What does that mean? Do you have any knowledge? Because I'm sure you guys as elected officials have had to discuss this.
Well, I know we, in terms of our seniors, we do have a senior center, and that's been closed since this started, and it's going to remain closed for the foreseeable future because we know that the seniors are vulnerable. In terms of opening up the county, I know that our mayor is on board with opening up. We had a workshop on this the other day, and we've come to the consensus that we are going to cooperate with the county and with the governor, and we're not going to be more restrictive. So if they say we can open up to 50%, we're not going to impose anything more restrictive than that. So, what that looks like, we're going to see a lot of appointment only type of situations, curbside service. My concern to the residents is, don't live in fear. Go out, if you feel comfortable doing so, and support the local businesses. But at the same time, if you don't feel comfortable going out, stay at home. I've made a decision. I've told my city manager, I'm in support of the mayor. I'm in support of businesses opening in Margate, because maybe it hit a little bit closer to home. I'm going to choose to stay in. However, that doesn't mean that just because I stay in or people choose to stay home, doesn't mean they still can't support local businesses. And I know we have a group in Margate called Keeping Our Money in Margate, and they're looking at a program called Largo, Let's All Go Out. And that could look at many forms. And I know some people are probably screaming, well, you can't all rush and go out. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means, again, if you can go out and you're comfortable, do so responsibly, wear a mask. If you go to an establishment and they're not wearing masks, if they're not following the guidelines, go somewhere else. If you choose to stay in, you can still order from those restaurants. And we encourage people to use these delivery services that are waiving fees, because these businesses, they really, really need the help. Now, I wanted to mention something that I'm very proud of. The city of Margate and our CRA has collaborated to do a lot of COVID relief efforts in the city. And from what we've been told, not a lot of cities have taken that initiative. So I didn't know if that was a question that may be coming up, or if we can kind of talk about that now.
Yes, because, and please help me. And I know that you guys are usually interacting with other elected officials. However, I use these videos also as educational tools for my students. So when you say CRA, could you spell it out?
Yeah, CRA is a community redevelopment agency.
Okay, and the purpose of that is?
The purpose of it, in a nutshell, legally, is to remove slum and blight.
Okay.
Is kind of how legislatively, according to the state, we have to spend our dollars. If it's to prevent
blight, for my students who will see this, because I have this, it changes every year, but this year I have freshman students who are fresh out of middle school, and they're freshmen, so these are young folks. Blight just means a place that looks run down, beaten up, broken up, and so forth. You don't want a house or an abandoned building in your neighborhood that has this boarded up, that has like graffiti on it and so forth. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to make sure that everybody who will see this video can understand what you are doing and what you're saying, because in a moment of crisis like COVID-19, we need to know what our leaders are up to, because folks are scared. Just yesterday, I was in the middle of another interview and a young lady is calling me because she's homeless. So we're going to get to the possibility of evictions and what the city can do to limit the possibility of that happening. So let's talk about CRAs, please.
Sure. So on the CRA side, we've taken a couple initiatives. The first thing was the city of Margate, and we actually have, we're a relatively small city in terms of 60,000, but we've actually got one of the largest CRA areas in the state. It covers probably a third of our city. And within that, it mainly runs through the 441 corridor. And we own 2 shopping centers, between 25 and 30 tenants are tenants of the CRA. And so when this happened and the governor's orders were to stay or shelter in place, we knew that we had to give relief. It's easy to do through the CRA. We knew we wanted to give a relief to our tenants. Some of these tenants have been businesses in the city for 30 plus years. And we knew that if those businesses went under, that could cause a negative effect, that could cause blight. And at the same time, we also understood that if we stood up and did something about it, that we could set an example for other cities or other entities to do the same. And so what we did was we immediately waived 2 months rent for all of our CRA tenants that were current on their bills up to when COVID-19 happened.
What was the official shutdown date? Was it March 13th, 16th? You know?
I honestly don't know that exact date, but we did it relatively quickly. It was within the first week or two that we waived the rent.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking for that is because I'm looking at the possible time frame of shutdown, and all of this will have a domino effect, right? Because if they're not working, if there's no money coming in for the businesses, the commission, cannot collect tax revenues, right? So there's going to be a domino effect down the line across just about everything.
Correct. And in terms of the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Association, and to explain to your students, it's actually the CRA, in a sense, is running these plazas like a business. We actually make money off these properties. And so, we did a cost analysis and our profit and losses, and we figured out what we could afford. And in essence, we're basically giving up our profits on those plazas to ensure that our tenants can stay there. So that was the first step that the CRA did to protect the businesses. And that was the easiest, quickest one to do because they're our tenants and we could just simply waive the rent. A little more complex issue, which we did, and I think only a few cities did this in Florida that I'm aware of currently, is our CRA created a COVID relief fund for businesses within our CRA. And so what did that look like? Basically, we started off with $100,000, and that would go towards up to $2,000 towards rent, mortgage, or utilities such as FPL, water service, that sort of thing. That businesses within the CRA could help get some additional relief because we don't own those other buildings. It's between them and their landlord. So we came up with a way to come up with $100,000 to help businesses. Now, one thing that I'm very proud of, and that it was really a good team effort, because I know the mayor wanted to put together a package, which we did. But something else that was put into the package that I had proposed was reserving money aside. So of the $100,000, and I'm looking at my numbers here, so if my eyes aren't looking right at the audience, I apologize. But of the $100,000, we put $25,000 aside for businesses in Margate where the owner lives within the city, within the CRA.
Very good.
We reserved money for that. The other thing that I pushed for and got was $25,000 set aside for veterans and minorities. And I don't want to say
for businesses owned by veterans and minorities, or for correct.
So your business would have to be within the Community Redevelopment Association, CRA. And if you own the business and you're a veteran or a minority, I wouldn't say you'd have preference, but $25,000 was set aside guaranteed for those businesses on a first come, first served basis.
Very quickly, if you don't mind. I recently completed the census, and I also have an initiative to kind of encourage people to complete the census. And it's not really important because it's not really what we're talking about. How does Margate identify who is a minority? When you say minority, you mean women, all women, right? Is it all women, Caucasian, Black, white, and then Hispanic? So when you say minority, are you referring to who specifically? Who would qualify as, and maybe that's not even a question for you, maybe that's a census question, right? So who classifies as minority?
I will say this, that was a question that came up during this process. And actually, it was recommended at the time not to put that money aside because there were questions of, well, how do you determine who's a minority and who's not? And I don't want to say I took offense to that, but I took the offense, and I reached out to the Hispanic vote. I reached out to the Democratic Black Caucus. I know Dale Holness's daughter had called and spoke about this. And we were able to get this money set aside. And I think the final determination was, and excuse me for not knowing the proper terminology, I can look it up and I can get it to you, but on our application, they use an abbreviation. And basically, if you do work with the government, the federal government already gives priority to minorities and to veterans, and there's a certain qualification, and that's basically the qualification we go by. So if you were to apply for a grant with the federal government and you're considered a minority through their qualifications, then you're considered a minority for the purposes of this grant. So that's kind of the best way I can answer the question for you.
All right, so let's go back to the initiative because I have some questions around it. Please continue.
Sure. So when you break down those numbers, it shows the importance of why we broke this down. So we had 76 people so far apply for grant relief. Mm-hmm. And of the 76, 39 were veterans or minorities. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The other 18 were business owners who also live in Margate. Mm-hmm. Only a small fraction of those applied were not minorities, veterans, or Margate residents. So, I'm proud that we passed this. It shows the need for it because clearly I think almost 50% of the people applied are minorities. And what we did at the last CRA meeting, which was just a couple days ago, we looked at these numbers and we made a determination to continue the program, and we added another $100,000 to the program.
Respectfully, Commissioner, there's something that I'm not hearing you say. You said that out of 76, you said 50 something applied, but what about they applied, but what about awarded? How many were awarded? Do you know?
So we just opened this up on Monday. We're trying to award it as soon as possible.
So it hasn't been determined yet. It hasn't been determined yet. Okay.
Correct. But we as a city, we didn't want to wait around too long to see. So what we did was we looked at the applications. We looked at the breakdown of minorities, of Margate residents, of other businesses. We felt that we were comfortable with how we reserved these monies. And we felt like the community needed some additional assistance. And so, like I said, we approved an additional $100,000 to the fund. So now there's $200,000 sitting in that fund. And based on the, we will look at the people that actually got paid, because I think in the next week or two, we'll know those numbers. And if a lot of people are awarded and the program is a success, I think that the CRA, I hope they would add additional funding to this program. But we didn't want to wait around. We wanted to get the money in the hands of the people that needed it most. And so we did it as quickly as possible. So
if the money comes from the federal government or the reserve from the city?
So this particular, there's another program that we haven't mentioned yet, but this money comes from the CRA, and it was our position. And I am in a nonpartisan office, so I don't get involved in the politics. But at the end of the day, the federal government failed us, and the state failed us, and we had an opportunity.
Let me repeat what you said wonderfully. This is a nonpartisan statement. Let me repeat that. This is a nonpartisan statement. Okay, it doesn't matter if you're blue or red, green or yellow. This is a nonpartisan statement. That's just a fact. Okay, thank you.
Correct, correct. And so we said, you know what? We're not here to take their place, but we're going to do everything we can as a local municipality, as a CRA, to help our residents. And in some cases, they may receive our money before they receive their unemployment check or their money from the federal government. Now, there was another program that the city did, which is a CBDG, and that comes from the federal government. And each city has the option of basically taking the money or not. And then they also have an option of administrating it internally or letting the county administer it. We chose to accept that funding. I believe it's about $200,000, $240,000. The program, it's coming from the feds and the Broward County. We've decided we're going to let them administer the program. I don't have any details on it yet, but I know one of the reasons why you have one of the largest networks is, you have conversations like this, and we're going to get that information out to you. So as soon as the CBDG funds and terms are finalized and given to us as a city to, start getting out to our residents, I'll let you know as soon as possible. So
Okay.
if you add up all of the assistance between the city and the CRA, we're looking at over $500,000 right now that the city collectively has given back to residents or is in the process of giving back to residents and businesses.
Do the businesses who are not part of the CRA have a chance to come back and say to you and say, look, I'm not part of that group, but I still need your help. Can you help me out?
Yeah. So the CBDG is going to be for, I believe, all residents, not just people in the CRA, and that's going to be for utilities. In terms of businesses, I know that the mayor had a town hall the other night. It was a huge success, and he brought in, community leaders from all walks of life, red, blue, right, left, and we had discussions on ways to help businesses outside of all of this. And something that came up and something that I had asked, and I know some of the other board members, was maybe lifting some of our restrictions on signage and advertising. And to explain to your students that are watching, many cities have a lot of stringent restrictions on signs and that sort of thing because they want a certain look and they want a certain consistency. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But in times of need, when you have unemployment as high as it's ever been, when you have businesses that are forced to close, something that's really unprecedented, we need to find a way to get their names out there. And so I've proposed, and I know some of the commissioners have also asked, that we lift the restrictions temporarily on signs. Specifically, if you ever drive by a grand opening and they've got the balloons or those big feather banners in the ground, those are only allowed for brand new businesses. And we want that to be allowed for a certain period of time once we're back up and running.
For the sake of the greater good, you ought to be able to allow the signs that I've seen here in Pembroke Pines, whereby the sign will say open for business, open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to let the public know, because many times people don't know whether or not the business is open. And there was a time where businesses were actually closed and it was not even reflected on the internet. The change was not actually reflected on the internet. So you had to actually have a big visual idea out there in the open to say we're open for business, and then that business can actually do some carry out business. Okay. All right. So for the sake of my students to get a basic understanding of economics and municipality understandings, folks, your parents buy things. It could be food, it can be Publix, and it could be Home Depot. And when you buy something that costs $1, maybe you're going to wind up paying maybe $1.10, maybe not that high, okay? That tax then goes to the city in order to be able to operate. That 10 cents goes to the city to be able to operate. So now, this is a question for you, Commissioner. When the business is closed, you do not get that tax, right? So there's a lot of conversation about saving businesses. Who is the person who's going to, or what entity is going to save the commission? Because the commission needs funds as well, right? Because it's going to be a domino effect of revenue loss. So what about the commission and the expenses of the commission? Who is going to help the commission out? Who's going to help you out?
That's a very good question. We are going to need assistance from above, and you pointed it out great. And of those 10 cents that go to businesses, well, guess what? The state gets the first pick, and then the county. So by the time it gets down to the city,
you get a penny.
We might only get a penny or two. Wow. And so the cities, absolutely, we are concerned about a budget shortfall. Just for your students to know, and I'm a realtor, when homes sell and property values go up, every time that home sells, the property is tagged with it's called assessed or appraised at a certain value, and that's what your taxes are based off of. So the more money your house is worth, the more you pay in taxes, which means the more money cities get. Well, if the home if people lose their jobs because their businesses can't open, and they lose their house, and home values fall, we're short there. So we're short on sales tax, we're short on home values, and let's be honest, Margate is not a wealthy city. We're not, I'm not going to mention other cities and put them on the spot, but we're not wealthy. And so this shortfall is going to be a detriment to us. We've got other issues right now with our fire department. We service a neighboring city, and there's a dispute over possibly separation, and there's a $20 million price tag associated with that. And how do we pay for that? Because obviously health and safety is my number one priority. But now you've got COVID-19 and all the shortfalls. So we're concerned. I don't know where the money is going to come from, but I would expect that the state and the federal government does step up. This is not a bailout. At least I can speak for Margate. We've been as responsible as we can be, but some of these shortfalls are going to be out of our control.
Talk to us about your geography, your location. Who are your neighboring cities?
So we're 9 square miles. I would say we're part of the Northwest Broward County quadrant. We neighbor Coral Springs, North Lauderdale. Tamarack is a close neighbor of ours. Parkland is very close to us. In fact, our first responders were some of the first on scene during the MSD tragedy, and Coconut Creek. So that's kind of to give you the landscape of where we're situated. We're kind of in the middle of Coral Springs, Coconut Creek, Parkland, North Lauderdale, and Tamarack just next door to that. And
you said, so to speak, you have your own army, you have your own police department?
We have our own police department, and we have our own fire department. Our fire department currently services Margate and Coconut Creek.
Okay. And one of the things, I'm not necessarily sure if this is an issue today, but one of the things, my wife is she's a registered nurse. She works at a local hospital in the emergency room. And there was a lot of conversation about PPEs, protective equipment for the nurses. And, one of the many reasons why I needed to do interviews with folks like yourself, I wanted to find out, well, what about the protective equipment for the firefighters and the police officers who are out there? So is there a conversation still going on about PPEs, or do you guys have everything you need right now?
I think that's a great question. I will tell you that from the beginning, I think that Margate was very prepared. And if you go back over time, I just see the steps that we took as a municipality, we noticed were before other cities. And I just think that because of our preparedness up front, it's allowed us to endure for this length of time. To my knowledge, we only had one firefighter test positive, and it was a false positive. So they tested positive with the nose swab, but when they were tested at the lab with the blood,
it was negative.
Confirmation, it was not. No one in our senior center that we're aware of had gotten COVID except for 2 employees, and that was after it was closed, and none of our seniors were in jeopardy. So to my knowledge, only 2, maybe 3 of our entire staff has gotten COVID-19. In terms of PPE, my father is a retired Coral Springs firefighter, so safety is my number one priority. One of the first things I did within the first week or 2 of the stay-at-home orders was, naturally I met with my city manager and my police chief and my fire chief, and they told me that we're prepared. But I trust them a lot. I really do. But in a pandemic like this, I don't want to make assumptions, because assumptions can get people killed. So I called the boots on the ground. I called the union rep for the police department. I called the union rep for the fire department, and I called the captains at all 5 fire stations. In Coconut Creek, even though it's not my city, we service them. I called the 2 stations in Coconut Creek and the 3 in Margate. And I was really pleased, because from the top down, they were comfortable with the equipment that they had. I'm not going to say that there weren't some worries of getting some equipment here and there, but overall, they got what they needed. They were never short. And from what I'm being told, we could sustain PPE for a couple of months if we were not to receive any more.
That's good
So
news. That's good news. Now, around this conversation about PPEs, talk to us about testing. Is there testing going on in Margate? Do you guys have clinics? Do you guys have hospitals? Do you guys have to go to neighboring cities? What's going on in terms of testing in Margate?
another good question, and that came up during the town hall that we had the other night from the nurses and professionals. It's a little bit mixed. So the nearest free testing site that I'm aware of is in Pompano. And any of the state-funded hospitals, the testing, I'm being told, is free. But the issue is if you go to a Quest Diagnostics or a LabCorp or an urgent care facility, or you go to a private hospital, there is still a cost for that. But to my knowledge, there's not, in Margate, we do not have kind of like what you see on the news where tents set up, where there's a testing site for everybody. We don't have that currently. Now, in the long run, I would like to see more testing. And if there was a way, if someone watching this network has an ability to have our residents tested, they can contact me. I would be open to listening to that.
At the end, we need to get that information out, because I always say, Commissioner, with the fear in the community, folks are going to look for leadership. So I'm going to, at the end, ask you for how is it that folks can get in touch with you, if it's email or if there's a phone number and so forth.
Sure.
So I'm glad that you're making yourself available, which is a true sign of leadership. Commissioner Aserio, I appreciate that, because I ran for office, and I am thinking about running for office again, because I'm increasingly finding out it's not an easy job. You're signing out for people to throw darts at you. You're signing up for people to throw darts at you because they don't have a job. They're about to be evicted, at least in their mind. They are afraid of the disease. They don't see any testing going on and so forth. And it takes a humongous amount of courage to even want to do what you're doing. So I applaud you. And in addition to that, you're making yourself available. So thank you very much. So if we can get testing to be done everywhere and in your city, it is something that we should definitely aim for.
Now, just something to finish off on testing, that's at the community, at the resident level. Starting from what I'm being told, June 1st, all city employees, from the commission all the way down to the person mowing the grass, is going to be tested regularly for COVID-19, not just for COVID-19, but for the antibodies, because we want our employees
starting June 1st. Starting June 1st. When did this come out? Recently, this week at that town hall meeting that came out at the town hall meeting?
No, I received a call from my city manager and assistant city manager yesterday saying it's an internal decision that they're making. But it's important, because if somebody has it and is asymptomatic, especially a first responder, we want to make sure that the appropriate action's taken so that they don't, endanger other first responders or endanger the public. At the same time, if someone's already been exposed to it and they have the antibodies, now I know there's some medical debate, well, how long are they immune? But most experts, for what I've heard, said you do have some immunity short term. Knowing that, if I get tested, and I was sick in November and I did a lot of traveling, maybe I have the antibodies, that's going to make me feel more comfortable going out in public to places I wouldn't, to help get the word out. That's going to make the employee that's nervous about coming to work say, you know what, I have the antibodies. Let me, my fellow employee is senior and they're more vulnerable. They can continue to stay home and I'll come to work because I know I have the antibodies. So
you can also sell your plasma, because that's your commodity now. You can sell your plasma and help other people recover. So that's pretty interesting.
And we've seen elected officials do that. I think one of the mayors of Miami-Dade or commissioners of Miami was one of the first people to get it and to donate the plasma.
Right. There's one place that it opened up before the pandemic, and it's literally walking distance, and you can make money by selling your blood, so to speak, which is really interesting, because as a science teacher, I find it interesting how economics and science always somehow come together.
I think that's pretty cool. I would donate my plasma if I had it, but by all means, any way to help somebody. If someone's hurting and they have the plasma and they can sell it and save someone's life, all power to them.
Commissioner, do you intend to get tested?
Yeah, I as soon as it's available, I have no problem getting tested, and I look forward to it.
I appreciate that. Commissioner, we haven't talked about what's probably the most important to me aside from health, education. Talk to me about how many schools are there in your district, because there are these little flickerings of news coming about whereby school may not even open in the fall. So talk to me about how many high schools, middle schools, elementary schools there in Margate, and how closely are you guys working with the Broward County School Board? Because when parents are afraid, they don't just yell at the school system, they probably kind of yell at you as well, because the fact that they have to become overnight teachers. So talk to us about education and the relationship between the commission and what's going on with the school system in Margate.
So great question. Margate does not have our own high school. Our high school, our students typically would attend Coconut Creek High or Coral Springs High, where I graduated. Okay. We have 2 middle schools, and I don't have any children, so it's a little bit on the spot, but I want to say we have 3 elementary schools. Okay. In terms of our relationship with the school board, I will tell you that our at-large representative, Lori Aldeloff, as well as our district representative, Nora Rupert, we have great relationships with them. They both will pick up the phone and go to bat for Margate. In terms of the school board itself, it's been a little bit frustrating. Not so much on the education side, but when this first came out, when these stay-at-home orders first came into place, Margate was left out of the food distribution site by Broward County Schools.
I saw that.
And there's 31 cities, and they opened up, I want to say, like 50 sites. So in theory, every city would get 2. And what was disturbing was very wealthy cities. I mean, the wealthiest of Broward County were getting 2 and 3 and 4 sites. And one of our neighboring cities had 2 food distribution sites within a mile of each other. And it was frustrating because the administration was telling us that it was based on demographics and economics and income. And I'm saying, look, I will challenge you any day of the week to show me that, the per capita in Margate is higher than our neighboring cities. Because
did you guys actually have that conversation? Did you actually have that conversation?
We did. And our school board members, Aldeloff and Rupert, were on our side with this.
You mean Aladef, right? Lori Aladef?
Aladef, yes, and apologize for not pronouncing her name correctly. But we really had to put pressure on the school board itself to the point where I basically said, look, I'm going to call a press conference if you don't have something by, next week. Or right. I told them they had till the end of the next day to get something for next week.
That's right.
And it got, it got published in margatenews.net. And coincidentally, a couple of days later, Margate Middle School is distributing food. So it was not something that I just did. I don't want to take the full credit for that. We had a couple other commissioners as well fight for that, but it was a battle that we had to do. And I know that's not exactly on education, but it's something that we had to fight through the school board to get for residents, in need. In terms of the learning aspects of it, I haven't gotten that many complaints since the initial launch. So when Broward schools first went live, I know there were issues with students getting computers. I know it was overwhelming. I have a lot of friends in Margate that have young kids, and they were very overwhelmed. One, the system was crashing. 2, they can't afford, they have 3 kids, but only 1 computer or 1 iPad, and how do they all get the same time? I can't tell you. I haven't seen the program. I don't have children to give you firsthand experience, but having a pulse on the community, I received a lot of complaints in the beginning. I have not received any now. So I would, in fairness, say that maybe they've made some improvements. I think the biggest concern is going to be, well, there's a lot of businesses that still are not going to open. You know, my wife works for an insurance company. They're not opening for a while still. There's a lot of businesses that are still going to stay home. There may be a second round of COVID-19. And as Nora Rupert pointed out at our town hall, school may be closed into the fall. And the biggest concern is, you know, if the parents have to work, where are the students going to go? And I don't know the answer to that. My plea to my business owners was, you've pled with us to reopen, and we're doing that. Work with us to be lenient with your employees, because without your employees, you don't have your business. And you have every right to open, but if you know, if you have 10 people and 3 of them are senior, or one of them is a single mother or single father, you know, let them work from home if they can. You know, I don't want them to abuse the system, but make accommodations, because, you know, daycare is not cheap, and parents have to go to work and students have to learn. And so I ask, you know, and this isn't just to Margate, this is really to Broward County. If you own a business, please be flexible with your employees. If they are at risk, if they're senior, if there's a legitimate reason, you know, please work with them.
Commissioner, respectfully, let me expand on what you're saying. And as a person of public health and biomedical science, my first graduate degree was in anthropology, and I study people and I study what I see on the news. So I read, and I'm a non-English speaking immigrant myself. I'm here from the Dominican Republic. My mother's from Haiti. My father's Cuban. So I try to, my wife is Puerto Rican, so I try to speak to all of the people. And if you listen to National Public Radio will say that the highest population of people who are unemployed through this pandemic are Hispanics, and then followed by African Americans. There's these buzzwords that really kind of gets under my skin: essential versus non-essential. And I say respectfully to the powers that be, there's no such thing as non-essential. There's no such thing as non-essential, because oftentimes we are what we do. I'm a teacher, so therefore I am an educator. And when you say somebody they're non-essential, what you're saying to them is that they're not important. What they're doing, the value that they bring to your establishment is really not that significant. Well, if you can operate your business without that person, which is probably what you're calling as non-essential, when that person doesn't get that paycheck, their bills are still essential. Everybody matters. Every job matters. I say we're all God's children. So, you know, when you're asking for the flexibility, I echo that, and I appreciate that, because of the fact that there's really no such thing as non-essential. I don't care if the person's sweeping the streets. There's value in keeping the streets clean. Everybody's somebody. Everybody's somebody, and they need that job. They need that job. They need to be able to feed their kids, because people are afraid, not just for themselves and their health, but, you know, when they're not working and there's no money coming in, if they're working in hospitality, or they're working in hotel, restaurants, and so forth, their kids are going to say, "Mom, Dad, what are we going to eat for dinner?" And that's a very, very, very daunting and scary thought. So I thank you. And I really, really appreciate you asking for the businesses in Margate to be flexible with their employees and try to keep them on.
No, absolutely. And like I said, I ask all business owners in Broward County that are watching to take that same consideration. And you are correct. Every employee matters. You know, I was asked to do a video to thank our first responders and essential workers, but I also thanked our non-essential workers, because they're just as important. They may not be out there, you know, cleaning up the sewer line or the broken water main line or connecting our power, but they still have a role in government. Government has to function. And if our secretary can't establish a schedule, you know, how do you know, if our administration can't work, if our workers that, again, people call non-essential can't function, then the essential workers can't function. Right. So you need everybody to make the team in order to get the team going. So
does Margate have a strong mayor?
We do not have a strong mayor. No, it is.
And by the way, for my students who will eventually see this, explain what that means, please.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways that a government works. You have kind of the council or commissioner city manager role, which is where you have a commissioner or councilman. And, there's a technical difference there, but for the conversation of this, it's kind of the same thing, right? Some cities like Plantation, they're councilmen or women. In Margate, they're commissioners. And then you have a city manager. So the city manager is kind of like the CEO of the city. And then the commission votes on the law, the legislation. They vote on what they want done, and then the city manager acts like the CEO. In a strong mayor setup, the mayor, there is no city manager. The mayor acts as the executive of the city, and they basically call most of the shots. The commission is still a legislative body, but the mayor has far more, and I don't like to use the word power with government. It sounds bad, but for conversation purposes, a strong mayor has a lot of power. Whereas in a city manager commission setup, all 5 commissioners have an equal vote. And most cities in Broward County, other than I think Fort Lauderdale or Miramar, and I could be wrong, but there's only a handful that run on a strong mayor setup.
I asked because yesterday on the news, one of the cities in Broward County, there was an announcement that all of the employees, the mayor came out and said all of the employees were going to be on furlough. And I don't know if you heard that story, but I was curious to see, and I have to call this my neighboring city. Everybody should probably know who that is. Somebody I have great respect for, and I need to call him and probably interview him and understand what does that mean? Is it because of what we've been talking about, whereby maybe there's a domino effect of lost revenue coming in, and as a result having to put the city employees on furlough? Has that been a point of conversation in your city? Do you know?
I would be lying if I told you that the conversation hasn't come up. Now, that does not mean that I support that or that we're going to do that, but it is a conversation that has come up, and I would not like to see it happen. I'm being told as of right now we have no intention. To my knowledge, no one's been furloughed, and as long as things continue to open and progress the way that they are, we have no intentions of furloughing anybody at this time.
Now, a furlough may be a big word for a 9th grader. What is, in simple terminology, what is a furlough?
It's basically where you're not fired, but you're almost asked to work for free. So to put it in perspective, they may say, well, you've got to work 40 hours this week, but we're only going to pay you for 35. Or you've got to come in and work 5 days a week, but you're only getting paid for 4.
Or we're going to send you home and not pay you, but you're not fired. And when things are back up and running, you still have a job, but we're not able to pay you for now.
Correct. And so again, it's come up, but our city manager feels that it's not necessary in our city. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that so far we've been able to maintain all of the jobs in the city, whether it's through termination or furlough. We don't want to see either one of those. And I'm happy that we are not going that route as of now.
Right. So one buzzword around this time, and we're very quickly coming up on an hour. One buzzword around this time is Zoom. So was your commission Zoom ready or Zoom-like ready when this pandemic took over? Because at the end of the day, you're still a commissioner, right? So how is it that the city is still doing the business of the people while we are under shelter in place?
We were very much so Zoom ready. Our city clerk is tasked with managing our commission meetings, and we have a PIO, but a lot of the broadcasting and such is done through the city clerk. Our city clerk has won state awards and I believe national awards on transparency in terms of how we function in terms of public records requests and that sort of thing. And we've always live streamed our videos even before COVID-19. So when COVID-19 happened and we started having our meetings from home, even before, one of the problems was we weren't allowed to have a Zoom meeting because of sunshine laws. In order to have a quorum, you have to physically be present. And I said, well, what if we have a quorum, and a quorum for your students, because I studied politics too, so I like to explain things. A quorum is a minimum requirement to have a vote or a meeting. So if you have a 5-person commission, you can't have your meeting unless 3 people are physically present.
Right.
And so my argument was, okay, I'll come to City Hall, I'll check in, I'll say I'm here, and then I'm going to go upstairs and Zoom from my office, so everyone's kind of separated. We're in City Hall, but we're in separate rooms, and we're going to Zoom it to the TV. And we were told we couldn't even do that because we had to physically be present. So I know that our city attorney, and I don't know what other cities she collaborated with, but I know there was a push at all different levels, at the Broward League, at the Florida League, to get the governor to sign an executive order, kind of waiving that aspect.
To change the law, or
to temporarily suspend the quorum requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that for purposes of health, safety, and welfare. So that opened the door for cities to have Zoom meetings. I want to say we were definitely one of the first to have a Zoom meeting, and not just a Zoom meeting in the sense of using the Zoom platform. There's other cities that Zoom, but they don't use video. They have their residents kind of call in advance and give a statement, which I'm not accusing other governments of screening questions, but if an elected official is asked a tough question and they have 2 or 3 days to prepare, are they fluffing on their answer or not? So I'm proud to say our city live streams through Zoom. We take live calls. You can either call in or you can Zoom, and we actively take questions on Zoom. And I know I mentioned the forum on the Young Elected Officials Advisory Council with the Florida League of Cities, and that's something that it's a 40 and under group of elected officials. And this is a conversation we've had with cities all over the state of Florida on, what's best practices, how to use Zoom. And I definitely feel like Margate has been a leader in that front. It's something that a millennial, I guess I'm a millennial by a few years, having a millennial commissioner, I think, between Facebook and going on shows like the Broward Social Network and having Zoom and then the latest thing I'm pushing with the city is to not only have the Zoom and then archive it, but live stream it through Facebook. I think that's an advantage of having a young commissioner on board.
I agree. Somebody who's tech savvy, who's comfortable with the technology, because I won't mention any names because I respect people's privacy, but let me tell you something. Not everybody's going to say, oh, yes, I'm going to talk to you live on social media. There are people at your level, sir, who are very uncomfortable with technology, So, and I tell them, what other options do you have?
Well,
If you're in shelter in place, what other options do you have? We have no choice but to get on social media avenue.
We do, and it's unfortunate for anyone that has that mentality because of all of the platforms that, for instance, a younger thinking city, Margate, our city managers, 36, 37, our assistant, we have a very young core. And I believe through Facebook, through our mayor's Facebook page, through my Facebook page, through the efforts that we make, I know Margate residents are more engaged than ever before. And if we were to turn off these platforms, they would be so far out of the loop. So to me, this is critical. Having this conversation is critical. I made a post last night that I'm going to be, if there's any Margate business owners that are watching, I intend on doing Zoom calls so that they can promote their business in Margate, talk about the protocols that they're putting in place to protect their clients, bringing groups on like the group Keeping Our Money in Margate. So I intend on having these Zoom calls, and I encourage other elected officials to do so. I know that I watch your show. I've watched other elected officials, and like you said, what else do we have to do? I know I'm not the type of person to just sit home and collect my check from the city and call it a day. I'm going
Right.
to do everything I can to get information out and to make sure that we're helping as many people as possible.
Commissioner, I'm going to join you on your endeavor for the businesses in Margate. I happen to be very lucky. I've started this platform a couple of years back, and it was mainly a platform it is a platform mainly to mentor young people, to also introduce them to politics and economics. I will welcome you and all of the business, because now I have thousands and thousands of participants on this platform. I welcome any business in Margate to post on the Broward Social Network and do business. Just post. Sometimes people put things that are kind of irrelevant and inappropriate, and I take them down. But if there's a business in your world, in your city, who wants more visibility and more exposure, I totally welcome to post on the BSN as often as you like. I don't have restrictions. I don't have the setting whereby I have to approve what you put. Sometimes it maybe gets me in trouble because someone say, oh, Ted Victor, something's inappropriate on your page, and I have to go and look for it and remove it. But if there's a business that's struggling, because I actually did that for Pembroke Pines, I called a couple of businesses and I said to them, if I were to allow you to post on my platform, would you give a person 5% off? And they said, sure, we'll give them 10% off, because I'm going to just go ahead, because I repost and rebroadcast this interview. I will go ahead and do that. And like I said, hundreds, if not thousands of people will see this interview. And the point is to be able to get the message out as much as possible, because if the businesses fail, that's going to trickle into everything. Because I, as a teacher, which is one of the reasons why I'm participating with the census, I've had 40 students in the classroom and 30 chairs. I've had 30 students in the classroom and 25 textbooks. So I need to be able to get the revenue coming in, the people knowing that they're there, in order for me to be able to, and it may not be that simple, but that's the analogy that I give, for people to be able to know that they're there, to be counted, and to be a part of the society, because we all need each other for survival. We all depend on each other for survival.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I will share relevant, appropriate information on the Broward Social Network. I also want to put you in touch with some of the groups in Margate that promote Margate businesses, because I think bigger is always better. So I will get you in touch with keeping our money in Margate.
If I get you one additional client, it will have been worth it.
Absolutely. And I'd like to have you on my page in the future when we do this. Before we break, because I am a commissioner I ran on communication and transparency. My city personal cell phone is 954 939
954
939
939
1987.
1987. Let me repeat that for you who are in Margate and who will see this. Commissioner Antonio Arcero's city cell phone number, where you can reach him if you have any questions, is 954 939 1987, and I will include this in the description of this video as well. Continue, please, Commissioner.
And two other ways. Well, there's many ways to get a hold of me, but the two other common ways is my city email is Arcerio. That's AARSERIO at margatefl.com. And of course, you can find me on Facebook by simply typing in Commissioner Antonio Arcerio.
AARSERIO at margatefl.com. That's your email address. And then they can just kind of Google your name and they will find you. Commissioner, do you have, before I thank you again and again and again, do you have any closing statements for social media land and the people of Margate who will see this video?
Yeah, I just want everyone, well, first of all, thank you for having me. To everybody out there in Margate, hang in there. We all want to get out. We want to do it safely. I need a haircut really bad. So, my beard's getting really long. I feel your frustrations. I have a Margate owned business. It's been affected. But I just want you all to know, the residents of Margate, one thing, that you have a commissioner in myself that's here for you. I believe that our other commissioners in our city that are here for you, we may have asked you to stay in place, but we've been continuing to work on all of our city projects, our parks during this time. We've had some of our parks retrofitted, AstroTurf put in. We've got a dog park that's ready to launch. We have a Culver's restaurant, which is going to be the first in Broward County, getting ready to open. So while you have been at home, we've been hard at work for you.
And we appreciate that. I appreciate that. Commissioner Antonio Arcero. I'm trying to say that in English because it sounds so Latino. So Antonio Arcero, thank you so very much for your time. You've given me your most valuable asset, which is your time. And moving forward in a week, in a month, in a year, if there is a message that you need to get out to the community, please, you can count on me to help you be your sounding board to get the message out, because communication is key, especially when our community is living in fear. And really, folks are also dying and so forth. So I welcome your receptivity. I appreciate your leadership, and I look forward to working with you again in the near future.
Thank you, Ted, and stay safe. Have a great day.
Likewise, you have a very good evening.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.